After the deserved success of Bloober Team's remake of Silent Hill 2, they said they'd be open to remaking more of the Silent Hill series. If I had to react to that with only 2 words, it would be yes, please. However, before Silent Hill 2, Bloober Team didn't exactly have the best reputation. I myself have limited experience with their games. I played a little of Layers of Fear, The Medium, and Blair Witch, but never got too far because I just wasn't having fun. If Game Critic was my job, I'd have stuck through it and had more complete feelings about these games, but I have a different job, which means if I'm not having a good time with a game, I stop playing. So my quick review of the Bloober Team games I have played would be that their attempts at a heavy story are cumbersome at best, and they're too reliant on jump scares. However, I do have access to the internet, so I'm aware that a major criticism about Bloober Team's games is their handling of trauma. I know there are people who disagree with this assessment, but even if all those people who say the treatment of trauma is insensitive are wrong, it's still safe to say that an overwhelming amount of people were worried about how Bloober Team would treat Silent Hill 2's story, which examines many different types of trauma in thoughtful ways. And I'm not saying all that to make a judgment on Bloober Team's past games, but just to say that they did an excellent job of keeping the story of Silent Hill 2 intact, and dealt with the subject matter admirably. While I do have some criticism of the Silent Hill 2 remake, that's not really what I'll be focusing on here, though it may be relevant on some of the different things I'll be discussing. Instead, I want to focus on what Bloober Team should and shouldn't do if they get a green light to remake other Silent Hill 2 games. Because while they've built up a lot of goodwill since the release of Silent Hill 2, again, rightfully so, they're not yet at a point where I have total faith in them. But I really want them to do the Silent Hill franchise justice if they continue to remake the games. I'll keep the beginning free of spoilers, and I'll let you know when that changes. So without further ado, here's the list. Do. Stick to the script. The stories of the original trilogy of Silent Hill games are deftly written, treating heavy subject matter with grace and thoughtfulness. They're also often subtle, trusting their audience to come to their own conclusions and figuring out things on their own. It's at least partly for this reason that the games are still so lovingly remembered. What's better than playing through a game that makes you sit there and question what you saw, makes you lay in bed and ponder the story, then take to the forum boards to discuss your own interpretation and read about others, maybe even indulge in some friendly arguments. Hopefully friendly. The game's legacies are so embedded in the history of video games because of how their stories are told, and spelling out the nuance too broadly will only dull the impact, make them forgettable. Don't look to the Resident Evil remakes for inspiration. One common through line I saw in reviews for the Silent Hill 2 remake was that the game didn't surprise players in the way the Resident Evil remakes do. When I was a kid, fandoms often had to have a rival. Nintendo vs. Sega, Xbox vs. PlayStation, Mario vs. Sonic, Street Fighter vs. Mortal Kombat, and more relevant here, Resident Evil vs. Silent Hill. Then, I was squarely on the side of Silent Hill. Now I realize that's stupid and it's much better to just like the things you like. I've loved every Resident Evil game since Resident Evil 7, remakes included. I was never able to get very far in the original games, though I tried with the first 2. I was, however, immediately hooked on the Silent Hill games on release. The series have their similarities, but now that Silent Hill is back, it's tempting to compare the two. Let's not. In these reviews, the writers lamented the lack of surprise that the Resident Evil 2 remake brought. First of all, I think Bloober Team innovated in certain ways that brought new depth to the old game, and that should be applauded. But in the review on Rock Paper Shotgun, Brendan Caldwell writes, "The window-blocking planks and stomping pursuits from Mr. X made Resi 2 mechanically interesting in a way that James's window-smashing and crate-moving does not." I like Rock Paper Shotgun, and this was not the only review I read that mentioned the Resident Evil 2 remake, but I can't help but think approaching Silent Hill in a way that feels like a playful reimagining of its source material, like Resident Evil 2 did, could have detrimental effects on Silent Hill's story, character, and themes. Resident Evil is corporate horror, concerned with creature design and presenting the depraved side of unfeeling corporate machine. It could be fun to point out the faults of corporations in the military. But Silent Hill's horror is more personal, and playful doesn't seem like the right direction. I don't know, I'm happy to be proven wrong on this one. I don't think the franchises should be pit against each other, but I do think they should keep their separate identities. The first iterations of these games were a good example of how games in the same genre, horror games with guns and tank controls, could still feel like entirely different experiences. The new versions are both over-the-shoulder horror games, but they can, and should, remain distinct experiences. Do keep including the types of innovations that fit better with Silent Hill. I won't be spoiling anything too big in this section, but if you want to go in completely blind, maybe play it up till you get to the Woodside Apartments before you watch the rest. Before you get to the first true level of the game, you're wandering the streets of Silent Hill. In the original, this was a relatively short section where you find out it can be better to run from enemies than to fight, especially on the wide open streets. It also sets the mood with the oppressive fog and impossible pits blocking off certain paths. The remake does the latter, not so much the former. Bloober Team reworked the combat, and it can actually be a little fun, but that's not what I'm talking about yet. Instead, I want to point out what happens when you finally receive the key for the Woodside Apartments. At this point, the wind suddenly picks up. Once dead monsters rise up. It really lends a sense of urgency to get to the apartments as quickly as possible. It's an incredible sequence that put me immediately off guard, scared the crap out of me, and urged me to run past the enemies in the street in a desperate attempt to get to the apartments. As far as new wrinkles to the gameplay are concerned, this was exceptional, and fits with the atmosphere so much better than any playful addition. Admittedly, it's not a trick you can pull often, but here, it works. So yeah, come up with your own ideas on how to add new wrinkles to a decades-old game. Don't listen to the anti-DEI folks, sweet baby detractors, etc. I'm really tempted to just say, just don't, and leave it at that, but I think there's enough of this nonsense going around that it deserves to be more completely addressed. A certain set of people who play video games seem to be convinced that they are an oppressed minority and are under attack by the powers that be. Hopefully, by the time the next Silent Hill game is remade, this movement, if you want to call it that, will have died down. But it keeps rearing its ugly head, so I doubt it. Like Gamergate before it, these people use the language of some kind of freedom fighters, but are only interested in keeping games as straight, white, and male as possible. They're the people who claim that Angela's design in the remake was somehow an attack on them as gamers. Angela, a character who was always dressed conservatively and was never meant to be seen as sexualized, has been used as an example of uglification and wokeness in the remake. That's not the only example, but it is a small part of a pathetic attempt to treat these petty grievances towards any hint of diversity in games as somehow a noble battle against all-powerful story consultants? All-powerful game journalists? All-powerful liberals? Before a game is released, they'll scour the credits and other pre-release info like videos or articles and look for any hint of wokeness. This could mean a black woman as a creative lead, the involvement of Sweet Baby Inc., a woman whose jawline is deemed too masculine, or way too many other laughable complaints. And if a game they deemed as woke is a bad game, they'll blame it on the aforementioned wokeness and claim it as some kind of moral victory. Or, if a game is praised, they'll take, weirder steps. For example, the Silent Hill 2 remake received close to universal praise, and some warriors changed the review scores listed on Wikipedia to reflect a game that reviewed extremely poorly. It feels like it should be satire, but just like so many things that feel like satire these days, I don't think it is. But the good news is, I don't think Bloober Team cares about these things. However, Konami hasn't earned back any goodwill. Sure, the Silent Hill 2 remake has been a success, but the free game Silent Hill: The Short Message had a more mixed reception, though I like to find, and it was a free game. I might have felt differently if I had to pay for it. But the interactive show/game/experience Silent Hill Ascension was an enormous disappointment. Just an absolute joke. And Konami, above all else, just wants all the money. And it's easy to imagine a Konami that pushes Bloober Team to, put Heather, the protagonist of the third game, in a low-cut crop top, push-up bra, short skirt, and some sexy makeup, in an effort to please everyone, which never works. I just hope they can drown out all that noise and make a game that honors the other games, Silent Hill 1 and 3 especially, in the way they did for Silent Hill 2. For the last two, I'll be getting into spoiler territory, so if you still want to experience the game on your own, tune out now. Seriously, I'm gonna spoil the end of the game in a few seconds, so leave if you don't want that. Let characters' actions and environmental details tell the bulk of the story. James Sunderland, the protagonist of Silent Hill 2, was drawn to Silent Hill the town because...
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary. My wife's name. It's ridiculous. Couldn't possibly be true. That's what I keep telling myself. Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago.
At the end of the game, when he remembers that he killed his own wife, he's confronted by Laura, a young girl who had befriended James's wife Mary in the hospital, and asks him why he did it.
Hey, there you are. Do you know where Mary is? Come on, talk to me.
Mary's gone. She's dead.
Liar. That's a lie.
No. It's the truth.
She died because she was sick.
I killed her.
Killer? Why'd you do it? I hate you. I want her back. Give her back to me. I knew it. You didn't care about her. I hate you, James. I hate you. I hate you. I hate you.
I don't know how many other people felt the same here, but I was so sure he would scream out, "I already hate myself," or something like that. Right to the very end, I was worried Bloober Team couldn't help themselves. They would shout at you, and it was perfectly fine to let the player figure it out for themselves. But they didn't. This moment works really well. James is dejected, resigned. He's okay if Laura hates him. And it's okay if the player does too. He's done an awful thing, and the game in both its iterations is not concerned with forgiving him or forcing any emotion on the player. It wants us to sit with James here and think whatever we want about him. In the image of James in his chair, head in his hands, it's just as hard here as it did 20-something years ago. And it's because they left it alone. So please keep doing that. Leave things open to our interpretation when it's required. And the reason I'm saying this is because the protagonist in the third game breaks the fourth wall in a couple moments, and I'm worried an emboldened Bloober Team would take that aspect and their approval after this release to just really go wild with shit like this. Please don't. You spent so much time putting details into faces, keep letting those faces do some of the storytelling. And speaking of Silent Hill 3, that game had some incredible environmental storytelling. Arguably, the environmental details tell a more interesting story than the main plot. I think remaking Silent Hill 3 would provide an excellent opportunity to expand on that environmental storytelling. And I'd love to see that without extra dialogue getting in the way. Don't bloat the runtime with enemy encounters. I know one of Bloober Team's goals in recreating Silent Hill 2 was to rework the combat. And they've succeeded at that. It's actually, dare I say it, quite fun at times. On normal difficulty, I was able to beat almost anything by dodging and hitting it with a pipe. The exceptions were the nurses, who I just couldn't get the timing right on, and the crawling mannequins that wouldn't stay around long enough after jumping off the wall or ceiling. I was even able to beat the dual pyramid heads with my trusty pipe. All this meant I usually had an abundance of ammo after the first part of the game, as well as an abundance of health items. I like to play it on hard to feel a bit more stressed, but there's just so much combat. Because you're encouraged to really scrounge for items, it's not as feasible here to just avoid combat as it was in the original. And that's fine for a first playthrough, but it makes me hesitant to replay it. I will, but the amount of combat could be tedious when you already know what's going on, and what was once a tense exploration of a creepy environment can turn into a rote shooter. I know one or more of the endings require that you kill fewer enemies, so that might be an interesting wrinkle. But I want to draw your attention once again to the final moments of the game. After James learns the truth about what he's done, he makes his way through a crumbling Lakeview hotel. It's a lengthy segment, and one I was constantly nervous would start throwing more enemies at me. I just knew a mannequin would be hiding behind a wall at some point. But there wasn't. And there shouldn't be. James has figured out his demons, and there's no reason for him to keep fighting them, except for the big ones, of course. And I absolutely loved this sequence. They held back. They let me and James sit with this knowledge of his horrible deed with only the cracked wood and dust-specked light coming through the windows. There are 3 enemies towards the end of this segment, but they're not threatening. Listless. You can kill them out of instinct, but I don't think you have to. I think they'll leave you alone. And it reminded me of what the original did so well. It was enough in so many instances to let the dread of what could be around the corner be the thing to keep you scared. In the remake, there's almost always something around the corner. But why does there have to be? Let us breathe. Keep us on our toes, not because there is something around the corner, but because there might be. If I had to pick one game series that influenced me the most as a kid, it would be Final Fantasy. But if I had to pick 2, the second would be Silent Hill. I didn't spend nearly as much time playing Silent Hill as I did other series, but the game's images and themes have stuck with me for over 20 years. For so long I craved something similar, but it was difficult to find. PT was excellent, but understandably short. Also, when I switched over to PS4 Pro, I told myself the one thing I couldn't forget to copy over was PT, and I fucking forgot. Don't worry though, I still have my video of my defeat over the headless bloodletting beast in Bloodborne. God damn, I'm an idiot. I also know I need to play Visage. I've tried a few times, but it just starts so slow. I just really need to find a day to delve in. There's also House Beneviento in Resident Evil Village, and again in the Shadows of Rose DLC actually. But now, with the release of the Silent Hill 2 remake, there's a chance to revisit these games again in a brand new perspective, and I'm excited. But I just really don't want Bloober Team and Konami to get me excited, only to let me down. They've done something incredible here. Please keep it going. Oh yeah, one more thing. Do bring back this lovely, incredible map. The maps in the original games were something I always loved. They feel like maps you might actually find in a stand somewhere, and the markings you make as you go made sense and were extremely helpful to my direction-addled brain. And if you do remake Silent Hill 3, give me a map for the damn subway at the beginning of the game. Thanks for watching. For the record, Sega, PlayStation, Sonic in the 90s, but Mario now, Street Fighter, and Silent Hill. Couldn't help it and got in touch with my 90s self.